I'm standing on the balcony of beautiful Basildon Park in Berkshire, which every Jane Austen fan will recognise from the Keira Knightley film of Pride and Prejudice. And I'm sure a lot of people will remember the big scene when all the characters were gathered exactly where I'm standing now. And I can't think of a better or more appropriate place to talk about my own novel, Murder at Mansfield Park. Now, that's the sort of title that tells you quite a bit about what you're going to get when you look inside. It's obviously a murder story, but it's also based on Mansfield Park. I first read Mansfield Park when I was about 18. I actually studied it for my school leaving exams. And I then studied it again when I did English at university. And one way or another, this book has followed me around most of my adult life. And I am actually fascinated by it. Part of the fascination is the fact that it is so different from the others, particularly something like Pride and Prejudice, which is always seen as a light and sparkly book. You don't get any of that in Mansfield Park. Much, much more serious. And with a much more serious heroine as well. She's quite hard to like, Fanny Price, and a lot of the people that do have a problem with the novel, it tends to revolve around her. And it's not a modern thing either. Even Jane Austen's own mother thought that Fanny Price was insipid. So, from my point of view, the great question was why Jane Austen decided to make her heroine at all. From my point of view, I think there's a far more likely candidate in Mary Crawford. She's much more like Elizabeth Bennet, much more like Emma. And she really has some life and some energy about her, which are really appealing. So the first thing I did with my novel was to turn the whole thing round and look at it from Mary Crawford's point of view. So my Mary Crawford is the heroine of Murder at Mansfield Park. And the first half of the book is all about looking at the events that happen from her point of view. So there are lots of the same episodes that people will remember, like the theatricals and the visit to Southerton Gardens, but seen from a different point of view, and some of the characters have a different twist on them as well. Now, the second half of the book is when it gets interesting, because that's when we get the murder. And my inspiration for doing that was realizing some years ago that the whole setup of Mansfield Park is very like your classic English country house murder. If you think about it, you have all of these characters isolated together in a beautiful big house like this one, and then there's lots of suppressed emotions going on, lots of unspoken feelings, and then suddenly everything's thrown into confusion by the arrival of the charismatic outsider, Henry Crawford. Now, in Jane Austen's novel, what results is emotional chaos and scandal, whereas in mine, it takes a darker tone and it turns into violence. Now, this part of the book was great fun to write, as I'm sure you can imagine, but it also meant I needed a certain amount of research done, because I didn't know at that time how a murder would actually have been investigated in 1811, when my novel is set. And of course, at that time, England did not have a police force. We didn't get police in London until 1829, and in the countryside it was much later even than that. At the time of the murder that's set in my book, you really would only have had a parish constable, and he was probably just an old man who was doing it as an honorary job. So you didn't have a lot of options open to you if you didn't catch your culprit red-handed. One of the things you could do was put an advert in the paper and ask for information, but often that didn't work. So the other thing you could do was hire somebody and get them to investigate it on your behalf. And that's exactly what happens in my book. They bring in a thief-taker from London. Thief-takers were basically like bounty hunters. They're private citizens, so they have no official standing. But they investigate crimes and then get a reward for their work. And the whole system went back several hundred years before Jane Austen's time. And right at the beginning, you could actually get £40 for informing on a highwayman, and you got to keep his horse as well, which I think sounds rather fun. So this allowed me to create a whole new character called Charles Maddox, who comes in from London, has a completely different background to anybody in Mansfield Park, and throws the whole thing into confusion. And that was amazingly interesting to write, the contrast in the social background between my Charles Maddox from London and all the elegant Regency gentlemen and ladies at Mansfield Park. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the sort of thing I've been trying to do with my book. I really hope that anyone who really loves their Jane Austen will get a lot out of it. I've certainly written it in a way that I hope people who know Jane Austen will like, in that there's lots of little references to her other books and to her letters, and even to events in her own life. But if you just like a murder mystery, then I hope it works that way as well.